What's going on, future me? Just wanted to, of course, get into the pre-market plan for this coming week. There were a couple things that I covered in my trade breakdown, basically going in depth on the positions I took this last week of the 17th, how they played out. Basically, two wins, two trades. The second trade with three positions. Obviously, I went into how I executed those trades, what my thought process was behind them, and everything else. And of course, I want to do my best to improve, especially when it comes to following my plan. Obviously, I like how I executed those last ones, but I feel that with this pre-market plan and this analysis for the coming week, will brought me a lot more clarity and overall just like waiting for confirmations, everything else. Obviously, we're always trying to get better, that whole thing. So of course, we're gonna go ahead and start with GBP JPY. This is the weekly chart. As you guys can see, right, as I mentioned in the previous pre-market plan, we closed with strength inside of this liquidity zone. Of course, I was expecting a strong push to the upside, but either one of two things as far as how the weekly candle would play out. And of course, the first was printing with strength, breaking through that 170 level, that sort of 168 liquidity zone, and or rather, just having upper wick creation throughout the beginning of the week, not necessarily in the entire week, but the beginning of the week, and moving lower from there. As you guys can kind of see, right, it pretty much it played out, to the latter type of thing. It basically was upper wick creation for the most part. Luckily, I got out in time before the market eventually dumped on lower time frames, and we'll get into that. But with that being said, like in light of how this candle is now printed, it's failed to break above that weekly range. So of course, I I mean, I wouldn't feel, especially with how last week played out, I would not feel comfortable, one, or I wouldn't be able to accept the risk of a long with these, with this sort of price action. You know what I mean? In order for me to get long, new rule type of thing, in order for me to get long, I will need a weekly close above this range high, this weekly range high, as well as a print above on the daily. More so on the weekly though, just because again, we have not closed a weekly candle above this particular zone yet. Solid body, breaking straight through it with strength. I feel like that would be the ultimate confirmation to eventually get long. But until then, we are still playing inside of this range. This is now a potential, evening star type of thing. We have, the strong push to the upside, the doji candle, and potentially a strong move to the downside coming into next week. Or we can consolidate, right? Like, again, I'm not a genie. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. Who knows? Who knows? It's about like probabilities, that whole thing. But again, when I'm looking at the chart and I'm trying to assess what it's telling me, it says it does not have enough strength to close above that weekly high, and in turn will be moving to the downside. In the coming weeks, days, whatever it might be, we'll have to see. Again, we'll not be getting long until we break above this weekly range high at 168, like 167, 800 type of thing. So let's get into the daily. We can see just that, right? And of course, I covered this on my trade breakdown, but this daily candle close with strength is kind of what inclined me to get long. Of course, in light of wanting to get better, as we all want to do, I think it would have been much better to wait for a weekly confirmation in this sort of case, especially since we've been getting knocked back from the zone so much. Of course, we could have a very small retrace before that eventual break, but again, as far as what the market is currently telling us, and especially when we look at it from like a getting confirmation sort of perspective, I should not be getting long until we get that weekly range high break. So just want to make that clear for my future self. Of course, hold myself accountable, everything else. So with that, we've broken back into this range. We've also wicked at this small sort of minor zone of liquidity. I don't want to really consider this too much. And this is a 382 retrace as well from a daily fib, like local fib perspective. So we could be getting sort of a neckline retest here before a move up. But I don't want to assume. It's very, again, one of two things. You want to have an if-then scenario for both. One of two things, right? We continue to consolidate and wick this particular area. And this is strictly, from a daily time frame perspective. We can continue to have this sort of choppy not necessarily choppy because we just finished trending, but this sort of choppy price action before I move up. And likewise, we could also have the same scenario if, there's a move down, right? Something sort of like this, I would say, a print below this liquidity zone. Obviously, we, had a huge rejection to the downside when we did touch this zone. So with that in mind, I feel that it's a pretty significant level, at least from a daily time frame perspective, that we want to see break before obviously getting confirmation that we are going to move back into this daily range mid. Also, we have, again, we can have sort of a bounce or break scenario where we either bounce from this level or break it, and then moving, or at least trying to move back up to the 175 area, the next sort of level. Again, always want to, kind of drive back home or rather drive home the fact that I'm playing these positions level to level. So of course I get my confirmations on these different range breaks depending on what my bias is at a given moment. Of course, in light again of that weekly candle, I will not be getting long until I get a weekly print above that range high. Until then, I will be looking for shorts. I don't see anything necessarily good here, but again, this liquidity zone break to the downside into this range mid might be something that I could entertain for the coming week. There is some news coming out here as well. I'll probably pop something up on the screen here as far as what's on the docket for next week. As far as like GBP pairs, JPY stuff, I know that there's going to be a monetary policy statement release, I believe next Thursday. So I'll highlight all that in this part of the video here, and let you guys, of course, do your own due diligence as far as how that will affect the pair. Of course, I'll do my own overview now, but of course, you have to come to that understanding yourselves as well. So going into the 4-hour. Things always become much clearer. Of course, I love my high time frame price action and how I draw confluences between the two as far as high and low time frame, everything else. But the low time frames always make it much more clean and detailed for me to see. Right, specifically the 4-hour, we have a much more clearly defined range as far as where price could potentially go, where it's playing at the moment, and what I should expect for the coming week. So as you guys can kind of see, I did place a little bubble here for myself. This is a bounce or break level. This is basically the same minor level that is on the daily. Well, it's a bit more significant on the 4-hour though, I would say, right? Like we have a ton of knockbacks here. This is a significant level, a micro zone, whatever you want to call it. We could also kind of consider this a range mid. I always like to look at the market in ranges. So we have sort of a range low here, a range high at the June high, and then we have this liquidity zone as a range mid. And then we have like ranges within ranges, right? We have like this this level of resistance right here that could be a range mid for this, low and high. So that's kind of my perspective, how I look at the market. Regardless of that, within this range, right, we could, the way that I see it at the moment, we could potentially break this trend line, although the market is still going up from the 4-hour perspective. There is sort of a disparity as well, right? Because we have sort of a rounded top on the daily that looks like it's turning bearish, but we have a clearly bullish 4-hour and I believe a 1-hour once I get into it. So that's something that we'll have to consider and try, especially since we're moving our bias towards sells until we get that break to the weekly range high. Something to just be I guess aware of, right? Because again, it'd be kind of counter trend trading, especially since price is in a clear uptrend, since we're looking for that move to the downside. Anyways, we could either, again, the way that I'm looking at it is either a move up back into the June high to reject and move lower, or potentially break this this zone and this trend line at the beginning of the week, middle of the week, whatever it might be, and play into the next couple of ranges. As far as getting long or short, I would not want to get short until we break this level of this micro level of support or resistance and break into 164, right? So it would be something along the lines of this. I would wait for the clear break, retest of the same level, and a move lower, potentially back into 164 or lower into 162, just from a 4-hour perspective. And this is why I have these arrows marked up. Of course, if we move higher, I'm not going to be entertaining any sort of buys until we break that weekly range high. So I'd potentially look for shorts back where it got rejected at 168.800. So of course, looking for something potentially like this back into 166 or eventually 164. So kind of my two scenarios again, just to recap from a 4-hour perspective. We have the range mid break into 164, the retest of that range mid, and a move lower, potentially back into 164 or 162. And then we have a potential scenario where we move into the June high. And again, being that my bias is towards sells until we get that weekly confirmation, I would expect a knockback at that June high, especially since we had all this, we had this consolidation along with the upside, that sort of sideways, that sort of sideways movement before the reversal type of thing. So I would be expecting a push into that June high, an eventual rejection into the downside, that range mid, or again a move further into 164, 162 potentially. There will not be a scenario again where I am looking for buys until we get that weekly confirmation. I just want to make that clear for myself and everyone watching. So going into the 1 hour, we're moving kind of sideways, right? We really have a clear look at the range on the 1 hour, especially this sideways movement here. A lot of important levels too, I want to say. We can remove this just so I make it a little bit more clear for myself. We'll put this back on the 4 hour. Awesome. So we have a pretty clearly defined range at the moment. Either, again, what I'd expect again is a knockback at one of these different levels. So that's kind of how my charting is sort of geared towards for the moment. So at the moment, right, I would be waiting for a range break and a fib retest to get into sells. Of course, we have a September 22 high and the last week candle high back in September. So it's a pretty significant level. You guys did see, of course, if we look left, the consolidation and the bouncing off of this this sort of level, making it a bit more valid for me as well. A level of structure that we could potentially reject from before moving lower. So that's kind of the first level I have alerts set for, and the first level I'll be looking for sells specifically. Of course, if we move higher into 168,700 at June high, or potentially these bid candles, like these bid wicks here about around like 170, 169, 500 type of thing, I'd want to look for sells there, like again around the 786 or 618. And if we potentially, again, if we push higher than that, awesome. I just wouldn't be looking for sells whatsoever until I see a valid level get hit and a valid rejection, candle confirmation, and everything else that aligns with my trading rules to move forward. But that's only because of, again, waiting for that weekly confirmation, that weekly candle confirmation that breaks the range high for me to then get long. Because until then, it does not make sense to go for buys when obviously we're at the range high, we're at resistance, we should be looking for sells. Just my opinion personally, that's my bias, that's what the market is telling me once again, and I just want to, I feel like I always try to drill this, but it's important, right? Like resistance is always going to be resistance. Until we get a strong break above that weekly level, we should not be looking for buys. So again, future me, I hope you're listening. So again, with that said, I would expect a push into 167.94, also in confluence with the 618 the September 22 high and everything else. With that said, if we get a knockback there, I would love to go short there. If we push a bit higher into the June high, I would then be looking for potential scale-ins, or I'll be a bit more patient, as I mentioned in my trade breakdown for the last trades and last week. I'll be a bit more patient because that's something I thought I could improve on the most, especially letting price come to me and getting the absolute best entry for GJ specifically. So again, I would either await the push into 168 or 167.95, also in confluence again with that 1618. Excuse me. Also in confluence with the 618. Or wait for a push into the June high to then get short. If we break above that level, I'll just wait it out to see where price kind of settles, and then of course draw my fib and everything else, see if I see something a bit cleaner. But I will not be wanting to take shorts on anything above necessarily like the June high or these particular candle highs at like 169.23. If we're just printing engulfing candles and like breaking structures above that, I'd just rather sit out, especially since again I'm waiting for that weekly candle confirmation. So again, just to recap, I feel like I've recapped this 20 times. I I will expect a push to the upside into 167.94, the September 22 high, in confluence with the 618. If I'd like as well, I can be a bit more patient if I'm not seeing exactly what I'm looking for as far as candles are concerned. I can wait until we push into that June high, also in confluence with the 786 at 168.72. I will then be looking for shorts. If we push above these candle highs here around 169.27, then I'll just be sitting out altogether until I until I see price sort of settle. Because again, I will not be looking for buys above these levels until we get a clean weekly candle confirmation and a print above that weekly range high. Again, just want to make that clear. So I hope that makes sense. Going into gold. Let me go ahead and pull up the daily. So as you guys can kind of see, I believe I broke this one down in my trade breakdown a little bit as well. We do have sort of a double bottom playing out. Now this could either be one of two things: a clean retracement into this weekly level, also in confluence with this sort of liquidity zone. Again, also in confluence with that 618. This could also I wouldn't necessarily call this a neckline, this sort of micro level up here. But if you wanted to call it that as well, just to add a little bit more, a little bit more flavor to your confirmations, you could say that as well. But my main level being 167. So again, this would be a double bottom into those levels before we get another knockback. Again, we have that daily trend line there as well. So it's very possible that we move into these levels, move into this liquidity zone. We'll watch the fib plus zone plus weekly retest. And if we get a good confirmation that we are getting knocked back from that level, of course, I'll be wanting to get short at that particular time. Being that we're pretty bearish overall, like in the overall trend, I will not be looking for buys unless we get a channel break to the upside into 1725 and potentially higher than that. I would need sort of like a break and retest of this potential or of this particular level to want to get long. As well, if we look at the weekly, I would need a reclaim of this weekly level before getting long. Until then, again, I'm only looking for shorts because I will not be counter trend trading. Going into the 4 hour, we have a pretty significant trend line break on the 4 hour, but we also have a pretty strong level of resistance here at 1659 that I'll be waiting to see how price reacts to. If I go ahead and draw a fib, we can have the local fib here. We're right at the 786, so that we do have a chance 786 in confluence with that level of resistance that we do get knocked back from this level. But I do want to take into consideration this channel break with strength. Like we have big. We have really big engulfing candles moving to the upside, so I don't want to take that lightly necessarily. Of course, looking at it from the perspective of like me wanting to work on my patience and everything else, especially after last week's GJ position, I would either wait to see if we get good kind of confirmation that we'll be rejecting this sort of zone, or I'd wait to see what happens at 1678 to then get short. As I have in a bubble here, clean break back into weekly range equals a potential reversal to 1725. Again, if we break that channel on the daily and everything else, this is a bounce or break level for me. So of course, if we do break this level, like I'm still not going to look for buys until I see more confirmation on the daily and weekly. And of course, I'll cover that in the coming pre-market plans if that does happen. So I will still be looking for sells just at these different levels of structure and these different levels of resistance and everything else, whatever you want to call them, to align with my bias as far as all my setups and stuff like that is concerned. So going into the 1 hour, as you guys can see, of course, we have that 4 hour level of resistance. We also have a last week candle low from the 7th of October here. So, when we have overlaps of these sort of levels, they become pretty significant, at least in my strategy, the way that I look at the market. We have, of course, two of those here as well as a liquidity zone, altogether. So I would consider this an important 1 hour SR level. Of course, if we break back below that, I will be looking for shorts 100%. But there's a very strong likelihood that we get knocked back from the last week candle low here at 1659 back into 1645 before we move higher. Or again, if we break into and below that level, I would then play it to the next level of support here at 1617, exactly where we headed last week. So I just want to recap. pretty straightforward as far as this week's pre-market plan is concerned. Either, you know, we get this strong push into 1659 and a knockback into support and potentially lower than that into the following range. I'd be wanting to get short either at this knockback up here or this breakup structure down here below the level at 1645 into the next level. Or if we break straight through into 1678, I'd then want to short it at that level of resistance back into 1659 and potentially lower to 1645. If we break above 1678 though, I'll just, again, same way as GJ, I want to let price settle before I look at the next level I can short the market from. Looking at it from like a 4-hour perspective or even like a daily perspective, I mean, you know, if we print above this 1685 level, until we do that, rather, I will only be looking for shorts, right? So if I look at it from a daily perspective, then, you know, we're still below this. We're wicking at this level. I will then be looking for shorts on lower time frame. So that would be basically, you know, somewhere around this this level, between this range up here. So I hope that made sense. Just to recap once more, I will be waiting for a reaction to 1659 to potentially knock back into 1645 before I move higher or lower. If we break below that range at 1645, I will then play that into 1614. And that's sort of my plan for GBP, JPY, as well as gold. As far as indexes are concerned, I am of the same sentiment. This last week, the Bank of Japan intervened within the FX market type of thing. So price was a little bit volatile, went, you know, a little bit crazy, but I don't think that's going to change the overall direction, especially those small, you know, one-off interventions. There's been 2 so far, basically. I believe there was one in like September and then one this last week. It doesn't change a ton. It does change price action for the week though, like for that day. Luckily, I got out of my position before that craziness occurred. So as far as that's concerned, nothing really crazy going on. The dollar did get a small knockback here, but we're still trending bullish. Of course, until we break back below this 618 at 110, I wouldn't necessarily consider this to be a reversal just yet. We'll just find another floor before we move higher. JPY basket, of course, I think it's still going down in a straight line. This is kind of the intervention candle, like, right? We had one up here, and then we'll probably move into this range low before it, you know, move lower. Like nothing really crazy. GBP, same thing as well. Like we are getting this sort of rounded top that I covered last pre-market plan. This could potentially be a double top. Of course, we're still moving bearish overall. So, I mean, that's going to be my same sentiment until we break above these bigger levels, like on the weekly, unless we reclaim this. Exactly how I outlined it on the monthly. Move into 121 or lower, or break and retest of that level and a eventual break of that channel. But of course, I am remaining bearish until we break those levels. So that's kind of my pre-market plan. I just want to sum that up. I hope this was clear for you guys. I hope it was clear for my future self as well, because I know I'm going to be looking back at this often. So overall, future me, I hope you're having the best day. I love you, bro. God bless you, and take care.